Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a review that's a little bit different than what I have done in the past. This is not so much a review of a doll that is currently out, but this is sort of a how-to video, if you will. It is a how-to make a Robert Culp figure. So why am I doing this today? Well, unfortunately, 10 years ago, on March 24th, 2010, Robert Culp left us very suddenly of a heart attack. And with everything else going on in the world, this is being done, obviously, he died in 2010 and it was 10 years ago, it's now 2020. We're dealing with a pandemic. And we are processing this new normal, so I wanted to do something to sort of take our minds off of it, to talk to you about how you can be creative with your action figures and with your dolls. I've talked a lot before about having action figures and dolls and their playability. This obviously much taller person over here is a doll. I will say a lot more about him in a second. This is an action figure on your, what would be your right as we're watching this. It's about playability, not just who the character is, but what can you do with the pieces? Can you use them elsewhere? And both of these figures represent me taking 1/6 scale male figures and turning them into something else. Let's start with the gentleman who is in the outfit on the left. This was a resculpt by, and I just want to make sure that I'm going to pronounce her last name correctly. Yes, it is Laurie Everton. You can find her work on barbiecanvas.com. I will put the link in the description below. This figure originally started out as an Eric Raymond from the Integrity Toys Gem and the Hologram series. And Laurie and I have been having conversations. She knew I was looking for a Robert Culp. At the time that we did this, the Eric Raymond figure was the closest one to it. Why Eric Raymond? Well, Robert Culp has a very distinctive face, and it's very hard to completely encapsulate his face. But the one thing that Laurie Everton was able to do, which I will point out in a second, she was really able to capture quite nicely his smile and his eyes. If you know his smile and if you know how he looks when he's happy, and if you're a fan of his TV shows, especially I Spy, I will say more about I Spy in a second, this is very much how he looked in the second half of the second season and through the third season. At the time it was the 60s, he was in his mid to late 30s, he had very brown hair, it was longish, and he had this fantastic, wonderful smile. And if you know the Eric Raymond figure, you know that Laurie really did an extraordinary job reworking the lower part of his face to give you that beautiful perspective of the chin and the smile. So I was very grateful that she was able to do that for me. But there's a little more to this look. I'm going to move the suited fellow just out of range for a second so I could talk a little bit more about this. If you know the television series I Spy very well, or you know the actor very well, you know that for years and years and years, and you actually see this coat not only in I Spy, but it shows up in Greatest American Hero 2. He had this lovely jacket. I can't remember what it was called now, but it was almost like a off-white, getting more yellowed as it got older, but when you saw it on I Spy, it was more cream than white. Fleece lined inside, kind of like a raw. It's not It's not, no, I keep wanting to say Naugahyde, and that's wrong. Um, just really nice coat. And he wore it often on the show. And he also wore, much to the derision of many people, white jeans that never ever seemed to get dirty. Even after he and Scotty got into fights, the jeans were still immaculate. And he wore boat shoes or dock shoes. So, and the shoes, the jeans, and the jacket are all from a very early Integrity Toys Fashion Royalty home ensemble called Thrill Seeker. The sweater was made by La Boutique many years ago, and it is a guy sweater. So basically, Kelly Robinson, who was his character on I Spy, he'd have on a sweater or like a long sleeve tee underneath. He'd have this jacket and the white jeans. He also wore pretty frequently a black signet ring. And the black signet ring is much more recent. I can't remember exactly which home it came off of. But again, this is Fashion Royalty. And it is a black signet ring. He'd actually wear it on his pinky, but if I tried to put it on the pinky on this hand, it would keep falling off. But if you look at him in, I think he wears it in the Outer Limits episode, Architects of Fear. You see it all throughout I Spy. I don't know if you ever see it in Greatest American Hero, and you don't see it in his other series, Trackdown. But that was pretty much what you would see Kelly Robinson wearing. There were a couple of other pieces that I have here that I've saved. This is the gun that Kelly Robinson carried. This is from Integrity Toys. It is not like an action figure gun going to have moving parts or a removable clip, but it is a pretty accurate and frankly slimmer cut of a gun. So if you wanted to put him in a holster and have it fit under his coat, that would work. And that's actually something to think about, because in I Spy, in the episode So Long Patrick Henry, which was the first episode that aired in 1965, that, believe it or not, Robert Culp wrote. In So Long Patrick Henry, Kelly and the other character, Alexander Scott, are making jokes about how the holster in the gun breaks the line of their suit. So I think they would appreciate this slim gun that wouldn't break the line of their suits. Kelly also wore sunglasses a lot of the time. This is the closest approximation I've been able to get so far, and sometimes these glasses will go on and sometimes they won't. This is the closest approximation I've been able to get so far to the sunglasses he wore on the show. So there you have it. So that is Kelly. I have one other piece here that I thought might be kind of interesting to talk about. There was an episode called Bridge of Spies, where we learn a little bit more about Kelly's background, and we learn about his relationship, for example, with his dad. And we hear him talk about that he's given. It's not that he talks about it. He's given, and then he talks about his father's pocket watch. And that plays a pretty central role because the pocket watch has a bug in it. And that's how the bad guys are able to hear what he and Scotty are up to. I haven't done this yet, but the back of the watch has the initials KR, which means that Kelly is actually Kelly Robinson Jr., and that he and his father have the same name, which is something that it comes up again when Scotty says that they will build monuments to the stupidity of Kelly Robinson Jr. You know, there were moments where Kelly and Scotty wasn't always laughing and smiling. In fact, there were times where Kelly had to be quite serious. And if you wanted a very serious Kelly Robinson, there are a couple of people who do head sculpts and can do a much more serious face. The difference between what I just showed you with Laurie Everton is Laurie did a repaint of an existing figure. This is the work of Sean, and I will mispronounce his name because I never asked him how to pronounce it. I'm going to say Farot is his last name. He can be found at resinheroes.com. And again, I will put the link in the description below. I reached out to him some years ago, and I asked if it was possible if he could do a Robert Culp sculpt. He also did a Bill Cosby sculpt for me. I'll bring that out a little bit later, and I'll say a little bit more about that part of it. But this is a completely original sculpt of Robert Culp's face, and I kind of hinted at this talking about what Laurie did. Sean had to work on creating a face that is very hard to sculpt, from what I've been told, and I think he did a really good job. He got, hopefully you can see it with the light. He was able to get the definition of his cheekbones. He did a really great job with his nose. This is straight on looking at his face, how he would look if he was very serious or if he was sort of contemplating something. He also did a really good job, if you can look at the top of his head, putting in some of the natural highlights that were there. Obviously, going also by what Sean calls his website, this is a completely resin, R-E-S-I-N, resin head sculpt. So it is not hair, it's obviously painted on hair. But again, he did some really nice detailing with highlighting, which you can still do. And you can always request, if you're asking someone to do a head sculpt, you will pay for that. You can always ask them to detail it by giving you, older hair. This is actually a good face sculpt to go more with the Maxwell, which was, the early 80s. So if you wanted it to be done again, you could get like grayer hair. I'm very pleased with this sculpt. I was also very pleased with what he did for Scotty. I just want to very quickly say that he's also wearing what Scotty and Kelly would wear when they were doing, when they had to meet with people at the embassy. Hopefully I don't have to say, since the show is called I Spy, they were spies. But I guess I do have to say it. That was the plot of I Spy. Robert Culp's character, I've already said his name was Kelly Robinson, was a tennis player who was recruited to work in intelligence for the military. And Alexander Scott, played by Bill Cosby, was a language expert, and who also worked with Kelly as sort of his manager, trainer, companion. And when they were on assignment and they had to meet with people at the embassy, they obviously dressed very formally, in suits. In this case, 3-piece, jacket, vest, or waistcoat, as they say in Great Britain, and trousers. The 1/6 scale gentleman's suit 2.0 by Vortoys, found at Cotswold Collectibles. I paused on Cotswold because they have, as of this recording in March 2020, have just moved to Texas, but they are still taking orders. So anyway, you can get this suit from them. I highly recommend that you do. They are a great dealer. And this is the kind of suit that you can take from one action figure to another, to another, to another, and just have the pieces move. This type of action figure suit won't scale up to Integrity Toys, but Integrity Toys clothing can scale down to an action figure. In this case, I just decided, because this is an action figure body, which tends to be more posable than a male fashion doll body, I just dressed him in the suit. The only thing that closes with buttons on here, very interestingly enough, is the vest, which is a little bit tight on him. But the shirt and the trousers close with Velcro. But interestingly, I'll lift this up so hopefully you can see it. It does have a real belt buckle. The vest, waistcoat, and jacket are lined. So they do some nice detailing here. And if you notice again, when I was talking about earlier, breaking the line of the suit, this is where having, you could very easily have a nice thin gun here and it wouldn't put on too much weight, and of course the bad guys wouldn't see it. Sean did an amazing job for me, and I'm very grateful to him. And he is taking commissions at Resin Heroes. So go ahead and check that out. I do want to say there's one other head sculpt that I have. I didn't put it on a body because I have yet to find a neck joint that I can really work with this. And this is a very much more serious Robert Culp head. Now he's downright pissed off, which Kelly occasionally was on I Spy. The nose is still correct. This is how he looks when he's pissed. Again, it's resin head. Not as much detailing in the hair. Again, Brian was nice enough to put in some highlights. This doesn't have the highlights. This is by Brian Pagan, and I don't think Brian is doing head sculpts anymore. So that was another reason why I didn't go through dressing him and putting him up. Although you will occasionally find Brian's head sculpts on eBay. Sean you will find in resinheroes.com, and I will of course be pulling that in the link below. Now, why am I doing this? Why do I have these action figures here? Let me bring everybody back out and we'll talk about that. So if you want to get a Robert Culp figure, I would definitely encourage you to do that. And for a lot of us, we have very warm memories of him from being Bill Maxwell on Greatest American Hero, which we watched as young children. And maybe we appreciated him when we were hanging out with our grandparents, watching him be one of the bad guys on Columbo. He did it 3 times. That ties with Jack Cassidy, who played a villain 3 times. And only Patrick McGoogan played a villain more times. Patrick McGoogan did it 4 times. Anyway. But if you're a comic book fan and you've read The Watchmen and you know it very well, you know that episode of The Outer Limits, Architects of Fear, that plays a very interesting and key role in The Watchmen, and Robert Culp is referenced in the very last pages of The Watchmen. He also was Dr. Breen, the original Dr. Breen in the Half-Life series, and I know this week the next installment of the Half-Life series is coming out on video games. I'm trying to think some other iconic work he's done. Really, the big iconic work is I Spy. And I Spy was incredibly important in television history because it broke the color barrier. Obviously, Robert Culp didn't do it. It was Bill Cosby. And I'm just going to very quickly bring on the other sculpt that Sean did for me. He did do a Bill Cosby for me. I know that Bill Cosby can be, frankly, a trigger for some people, but if you can separate the man from his action, just very quickly, just to show you the sculpt, it's a very young Bill Cosby. It's the Bill Cosby that was Alexander Scott. It took a lot to get the show on the air. For the first seasons, it was on television. Many stations in the South would not air it. They didn't want Alexander Scott to have a love interest, so Robert Culp wrote another episode called The Loser to prove that Bill Cosby could play a romantic lead, and he did. He did it brilliantly. If you watch the series, and first of all, you can just enjoy it just for some really good storytelling. But besides all of that, you also have in that relationship, if you watch it, watch the body language between them. In every episode, there's always a moment where they're sitting down having a meal together, and they're like picking off of each other's plates, or they're making fun of the way that they eat, or they're talking over the case or whatever caper they're involved with. They're talking about it in the bathroom, and you can tell that they share the bathroom. Or they're getting ready to go out on a date, so they're in front of a mirror and they're doing their hair, they're brushing their hair together and straightening their ties together. There's an intimacy there that showed that went way beyond sharing a water fountain. It broke the color barrier, and it also broke a lot of the stereotypes about how heterosexual males should be around each other. And as a matter of fact, if the show had a fourth season in 1968-69, they would have done an episode where Kelly and Scotty had to protect an officer of the State Department who was caught with his male partner. And there's a moment where Kelly and Scotty have to write up the report and explain why they had to protect this State Department official. And they're trying to figure out how to say it without ruining the guy's life, because they don't think it's fair that saying that him being a homosexual should ruin his life and ruin his career. And that was 1969 that they were going to have that conversation. If that had been on if they had had the fourth season, if they had made it to television. 1969, they were going to start to change the conversation about homosexuality. Again, that's huge. They broke the color barrier in front of the camera. They broke the color barrier behind the camera, because the person who invented the Cinemobile so I Spy could film overseas, the person who invented the wireless mic so they could film quickly in public without having tons of equipment, was a man named Fu Said. And he was Egyptian American. He's an Arab American. And it took a very long time for Fu Said to become a member of the Photographers Union, or the Cameramen's Union, and the Directors Union in Hollywood. They hated him because he got rid of a lot of crew, because once you had the Cinemobile and the wireless mic, you didn't need as many crewmen on a set. But they also hated him because he was brown, because he was a person of color. And it didn't matter to the executive producer, Sheldon Leonard. It didn't matter to any of the people working on the show. They admired him. They admired Fu Said because of how talented he was. But it was a problem that Hollywood still has, with persons of color. And I Spy went a long way to breaking down that barrier as well as, by the way, from that moment on, television shows and movies were using the Cinemobile. They were using the wireless mic. If things were fair in Hollywood, Fu Said would be getting the Governor's Award from the Motion Picture Association for his work. But again, Oscars so white, hashtag. So there's that. I guess what I'm trying to say is I wanted to do this video and I wanted to talk about these figures because I wanted to remind everybody that Robert Culp existed, that he was an incredibly talented writer, director, and actor who did a tremendous amount of really amazing work. He wrote a whole bunch of episodes for I Spy. He wrote 2 episodes for Greatest American Hero. He wrote 1 for Trackdown. He wrote what is considered to be one of the best episodes of the television series The Rifleman. He's the person, I'll put the title of the episode of The Rifleman in the description below if you want to catch it on YouTube or in repeats. He also wrote an episode of the series Kane's 100. He directed the film Hickey and Boggs, which was instrumental to Quentin Tarantino when he was filming Jackie Brown. So this is a guy that you should know and you should remember. And if you are a fan of his work, I would encourage you, and I will also put this link in the description below. I would encourage you to go to Turner Classic Movies and tell them on August 16th of this year, 2020, which would have been Robert's 90th birthday had he lived, to dedicate that day, or at least the night, to his films. He did appear in quite a few films. Bob and Carol Ted and Alice is considered a seminal work. He was in PT 109. He was in The Pelican Brief. He played the president in Pelican Brief. He did do some amazing film work too. And there are a few of us who are trying to get TCM to honor him on his 90th birthday. And if you see this and you agree with me, just drop him a line and say, hey, August 16th is Robert Culp's 90th birthday. Can you schedule the night so we can watch some of his movies? That would be groovy. So I really hope you've enjoyed this video, which is mostly a how-to of how to put together action figures to look like your favorite celebrities with pieces you already have in your collection. I may do this again sometime with another figure. But until then, for me, Barbara, I hope everyone is doing well, and I hope you are staying safe in the midst of these very interesting times, as the old Chinese curse would say. May you live in interesting times. I hope you're safe, and I hope you're well. And I will see you in my next reviews, which will go back to being traditional and will go back to being Integrity Toys. Take care. Bye-bye.